Today we're going to talk about Duel Links FTKs. It's not the first time I've talked about this topic. I've talked about it kind of in my older videos or in my streams just randomly. But today I have a PowerPoint. So let's have a look at what are FTKs. FTKs are first turn kill decks. So what they do is that even though you can't attack in your first turn because of the rulebook, you can still win just by using enough effect damage so that you bring your opponent's life points to 0. So you can straight up just win without your opponent being able to do anything. And FTKs are cringe because, I mean, you wanted to play Yu-Gi-Oh, but you play a deck that doesn't play Yu-Gi-Oh with your opponent, so what's even the point? So let's talk about the wonderful Duel Links format. So what's so special about FTKs in Duel Links? So in Duel Links, we have 4,000 life points, which is half the amount of life points you have normally in the TCG. And burn damage is halved because, I mean, it makes sense, right? You have half of the amount of life points, so when Konami releases cards in Duel Links, they halve the burn damage. Except when they're not, because they only started to do that in September 2020, I believe is when exactly they did it. It's exactly when they released the Zexal world. Because before then, cards used to do the exact same amount of damage that they do in the TCG. So basically, it's pretty much double the amount of damage that they usually do because you only have half the amount of life points. And that makes some cards really, really strong. And so a solution that Konami thought of is that from Zexal onward, they're going to halve all of the burn damages so that they can release cards that they otherwise couldn't. Because there are some like archetypal support cards that just so happen to do burn damage that they cannot really release as is because otherwise they are going to be too broken. So that kind of allows them to still be able to release some of the archetype support cards without having to worry about people just FTKing. So yeah, that's the reason why they did that, and they did nerf a card that is released before 2020, and that's Lava Golem. That's the only thing that they changed. So Lava Golem has had its effect damage reduced to 500 from 1,000 because Lava Golem before then was always a very core part of stall burn strategies, and those were still kind of decent in before 2020. So in order to kind of nerf those kinds of decks, alongside the new changes, they also nerfed the Lava Golem to 500. But except for Lava Golem, every card released before September 2020 has the complete amount of burn damage. So they did not nerf any of that except for Lava Golem. So let's talk about my humble opinion on FTKs. FTKs are just not that good. Not in the sense of like it's unhealthy for the game. I mean, it is unhealthy. I don't think people are going to be arguing about this. I think FTKs are just not good in general, as in they don't win you a lot of games. Except when they are, which we will talk about later, pick unrelated. So let's talk about why FTK decks are not that good. These decks do one thing, and you can probably guess what it is just by, them being FTK decks. They FTK, and they make this their entire personality, which means that's the only thing they do. You build the entire deck, all 20 cards in your deck do one thing, which is to help you FTK, and don't ask them what they do going second, because if they can't FTK, they lose. And when you go second, good luck FTKing, because if your opponent sets up a single point of interaction, chances are you're not FTKing, because you need every single step of your FTK to go uninterrupted in order for you to have exactly the amount of effect damage to go for lethal. So if any one of those steps gets interrupted, you're not FTKing, and well, you're just gonna lose because that's the only thing your deck does, and if you can't do it, you lose. And also, hand traps are a thing. I mean, they're less of a thing back, like 2, 3 years ago, but now it's a pretty common thing for decks to have hand traps. Valor is released 2 years ago. Can you believe that? Valor is out in 2023. That's crazy. Imperm just got released, even though it's from a selection box, and it's still really popular. It's like the most popular trap, I believe. And then there's like Draw and Lockbird, which absolutely kills FTK decks, and also kills some of the meta decks. So people are running Draw and Lockbird. Yeah, Biru can sometimes hit some FTK decks that rely on heavy monster combos. Yeah, it's if your opponent has any hand trap, chances are you're not FTKing even if you go first. So let's have a few examples of what are bad FTK decks, at least what I think are the less good FTK decks. We have the classic imitation FTK. This has been a thing for quite a long time, actually. It has been around for a few years, ever since imitation was around. They did eventually ban imitation, so that it's no longer a thing. But back then, imitation FTK was always like, okay, so which engine draws me the most amount of cards, and whichever engine gets you the most card draws, you just place imitation and the token generating spell, and then concentrating current, or the equip spell, and then you just burn. And a more recent one is the Nurse Burn. Nurse Burn was really popular when people used to use it with the Sartorius skill, which lets you always flip heads. So you would play a couple of A's to draw, and then you would play the trap. I don't remember what that's called. It like heals yourself or burns your opponent. I mean, heals your opponent, and then you can just turn that into burn damage with Nurse. That's also in like the same group as the bad FTK deck group, even though it's really popular. I played that deck. I can tell you it's not really that good. It's like people just want to play 80 FTK decks that are popular. It doesn't mean that FTK decks are good if many people are playing it, and that's like one of the biggest examples. Athena FTK has always been a thing, but with the new recent update with the skill that gives you a free guy, with alongside the Rebecca FTK, yeah, this card saw a bit more play as an FTK because you just get a free guy for you to tribute summon the Tethys or whatever it's called, and then you just draw 10 billion cards and then you burn with Athena. And speaking of Rebecca FTK, it's also just not that good because if you play Dragon's Gunfire FTK, all cards in your deck are draw spells and gunfire. So like you're gonna if you play that deck, all you're gonna do is FTK. You're not gonna do anything else. It's a lot more consistent than Invitation FTK or even Nurse Burn. But we're not talking about how consistent the deck is. We're talking about if the deck does any other thing than FTK, and Dragon's Gunfire just happens to be in the same category. If you go second, it's pretty easy to stop them from FTKing just by having a removal. Like if you remove Guardian Angel Drone from the field, they cannot add Graceful Charity, and then they will just lose. So, what are actually the good FTK decks in dueling? So, in my mind, there has been 4 FTK decks that have met my criteria of being actually viable FTK decks that you can bring on ranked and expect to actually get King of Games with. The first one, Tachyon FTK. This has seen not that much play, just because Tachyon without the FTK is already a tier 0 deck. So why play the FTK version when the non-FTK version is also like the most broken deck in the game, right? Second one is Tindangle. Tindangle itself is not a really good deck, but it's pretty much 100% consistent, and it has a game plan. If they couldn't FTK, They can just still play generic extra deck stuff and just do Tendangle stuff, which is not very good, but it's not an auto lose, and that's really important. Also after Utopia FTK, because Utopia is a tier 1 deck, so even if you couldn't FTK, you still are just playing Utopia. And the most recent one that we're going to talk about is Dino. So the reason why those are the big fours of FTK, at least in my mind, is that the biggest reason is that they can go second. Because they have a normal version without the FTK. So, for example, Tachyon. Let's say you go second in Tachyon, which happens like half of the time because of the coin flip, right? If you can't FTK, that's fine. You're just gonna play Tachyon. Sure, it's gonna be less good than the normal version of the Tachyon deck because you are not playing Transmigration. Like the counter trap, you don't have the counter trap because you're gonna need to play more draw spells, and that card doesn't really do anything for you when you're trying to FTK. But that's still okay because you still have the broken skill, you still have all of the rank 8 toolbox options, you're just missing out on generic staples and the counter trap. But other than that, it's still Tachyon. And it's gonna be less good than normal Tachyon, but it's still good enough that you will win some games going second, and that's the biggest part, right? It doesn't have to be like excellent at going second, it just has to be decent enough. If it wins some games going second, that's already good. So let's talk about some math, some real quick math. There's a 50% chance of you going first because of the coin flip. So half of the time you're going first. Let's assume that you're going to get hand trapped in 1 out of 5 games. In reality, it's probably going to be even less from my experience. I played quite a bit of FTK decks trying to get to King of Games. I played a good ones, obviously, like Utopia. And depending on the meta, this number will change. Sometimes people play more hand traps, sometimes less. And also, different types of hand traps do kind of matter because say, for example, in the Tendangle FTK, sometimes Valor doesn't win because if you have like an extra Book of Moon in your hand, you can just chain your Book of Moon and then just flip your guy face down, and then Valor doesn't resolve. And in those situations, even if you get hand trapped, you can still win. I definitely have times like that before where I got hand trapped and still can win, so that's a rough estimate. So 50% of going second. And let's say your deck wins 1 out of 3 games, which is less than half of your games, but still you're gonna win some games going second. Maybe if your opponent doesn't have enough interruptions, you can still just push through it with your own engine, which some of the decks definitely can do with Tachyon back then and like Utopia because of their like rack up magic that just negates everything. You can definitely win some games going second. So if you add them all up, if you add the win rate going first and the win rate going second, in like this example, we get 56.7%, which is more than 50%. So as long as a deck has a more than 50% win rate, that deck is good enough that you can push ranked or KC Cup to the very top, given that you play enough games. So that's pretty much what qualifies an FTK deck as being a viable FTK deck, is that it wins more than half of its games. So TLDR, if your going second win rate is larger than your going first lose rate, then your FTK deck is going to be good. And here we are assuming that if you go first, you FTK 100% of the time if you don't get hand trapped, which some older FTK decks don't necessarily do that. Like Imitation FTK can just lose to itself because you draw poorly. Same with Nurse Burn sometimes loses, less than Imitation, but still. Tachyon is pretty consistent, and like Rebecca Dragon FTK is like pretty much 100%. Same with Utopia. So yeah, let's actually address the elephant in the room, which is this guy. He's a war criminal, and the reason why he's such a menace is because of his partner in crime. Miscellaneousaurus, if you haven't read this card before, which is understandable, this card basically says you can discard this card, and your opponent cannot do anything to any dinosaurs on your field in the main phase. So that basically says even if you have a hand trap like Veiler or Imperm, this guy just stops it. So that doesn't do anything. Even if you go second, you can just discard the Miscellaneousaurus, and then they can still FTK when they go second. Like, they can do the FTK combo, and there's not a lot you can do to stop them because you can't affect their dinosaur monsters. And usually the way to beat that is that usually they go into extra deck monsters that aren't dinosaurs, like the Evolzar, Xyz monsters. Those are actually dragons, so they are affected. Or they go to battle phase with Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, and then you can remove their Tyranno during the battle phase so that they can't do damage. But those weaknesses that usually the deck has doesn't exist if you can win on your first main phase without using any extra deck stuff. So you can just use main deck of dinosaurs using Superconductor Tyranno, just looping its effect 4 times. And you can completely just win in the main phase while you are still protected by Miscellaneousaurus. It's basically like what if Tenpai could FTK, right? If you play TCG or Master Duel, playing against Tenpai is basically like, okay, can I get rid of the field spell? Because if you can't, the field spell protects all of your guys from being affected. And so it's basically like that. It's like Gimmick Puppet, actually. It's closer to Gimmick Puppet. They have the field spell that basically says, okay, all of my guys unaffected by effects. So if I have the field spell, you good luck. You have to like basically draw Ash Blossom because that's like the one hand trap that actually can negate something under the field spell. Same with Dino FTK, actually. So even though Veiler and Impermism work, some hand traps like Droll and DD Crow do work. So it still not completely boxes out every single hand trap, but it's still like the fact that they're allowed to do this is just crazy. So let's talk about some solutions. So the easiest and the most straightforward and the most the solution that makes the most sense is, of course, just half of the burn damage, right? You did that to Lava Golem when you implemented the burn damage nerf. Why not do it to every single card before the nerf? It doesn't make sense that some cards, some old cards do the full amount of burn damage, like Superconductor Tyranno, and some cards after they did the nerf do half. Like, why not just make all of the cards do half damage? It makes the most sense. It's easy to do, and if like just the fact that they're not doing that creates this. This is stupid, right? Why is Hinotama limited to 1? Like, why would they need to do that? Just halve the burn damage and take it off of the limited list. It doesn't have to be like this, right? And I know some people are arguing that skills are part of the issue because like these insanely broken skills basically let you like they allow decks that could FTK 100% of the time. Something like Utopia FTK, pretty much if you could use your skill, you're pretty much FTK, like Rebecca Dragons as well. If you could trigger your skill, you pretty much FTK 100% of the time. To that I say most skills are actually fine. Obviously some skills are like really good, like the Rebecca skill, but realistically, Konami doesn't really like to nerf skills that much. Usually, even if they do, it's a small nerf rather than like a really big change. They didn't even nerf Dragonic Contact, for example. That skill is completely intact, even though I still think it's still broken. Skills like Despia did get a nerf, but it's like a really small nerf. It just needs you to shuffle a card back, so it doesn't really affect the consistency. And if a skill is too broken, I think you should still first nerf all the burn damages first, and that will solve most FTK problems. And any deck that remains that are still consistent enough to do FTKs, and then you can hit those skills to prevent them from being too consistent or letting them play cards that could FTK. Yeah, that's it. It's pretty much it for the video. Okay, bye.